Remove that immediately. The colonel's voice cut through the morning mess hall like a blade. That ridiculous bracelet doesn't belong in my kitchen. Sergeant Elena Morrison paused mid-motion, her hand hovering over the cutting board where she'd been dicing vegetables for 600 soldiers. The worn paracord bracelet on her wrist, faded green and black, frayed at the edges, had been there so long most people never noticed it anymore. But Colonel Davidson noticed everything, and he didn't like what he saw. "Sir, this bracelet stays on," Elena said quietly, her hazel eyes meeting his without flinching. Around them, the kitchen fell silent. Spatulas stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. In 11 years at Fort Harrison, no one had ever refused a direct order from Davidson. The colonel stepped closer, his jaw tight with anger. "I don't care if it's a family heirloom. You'll follow regulations in my facility, or you'll find yourself reassigned to latrine duty." Elena's fingers brushed the bracelet, and the rope-burn scar underneath it that no one ever asked about. "Respectfully, sir, you don't understand what this represents. Before we continue, if stories of quiet courage inspire you, type courage below, and tell me where you're watching from, because heroes like her prove that the strongest voices are often the quietest ones. I read every comment." Fort Harrison sat in the hill country of Central Texas, where summer heat could turn a kitchen into a furnace, and where Elena had spent the last 11 years serving meals with the same quiet efficiency that had defined her entire adult life. At 38, she moved with an economy of motion that spoke of something deeper than culinary training. Her auburn hair, always pulled back in a regulation bun, showed the first hints of silver at the temples. The rope-burn scar on her left wrist, a raised circular mark about 2 inches wide, disappeared under the bracelet she never removed. And when she worked, there was an alertness in her posture that had nothing to do with watching food temperatures. Every morning at 0500 hours, Elena would unlock the mess hall, fire up the industrial stoves, and begin the choreography that fed an entire battalion. The younger kitchen staff respected her not because she demanded it, but because in 11 years, she'd never once failed to deliver 3 meals a day, every day, no excuses. But Colonel Marcus Davidson had only been at Fort Harrison for 6 months, and he'd made it his personal mission to restore discipline to what he considered a lax facility. He conducted surprise inspections at odd hours, wrote up soldiers for minor infractions, and believed that rigid adherence to every regulation, no matter how small, was the foundation of military excellence. This morning's inspection had started at 0630 hours, just as Elena's team was preparing breakfast service. Davidson had swept through the mess hall with his usual critical eye, finding fault with everything from the way Private Chun stacked plates to the temperature logs that Elena meticulously maintained. "Your operation is sloppy, Sergeant Morrison," he'd announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "I see shortcuts everywhere. Relaxed standards. The kind of complacency that gets soldiers killed in the field." Elena had continued her prep work, her hands steady as she portioned scrambled eggs into serving trays. She'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting. Some authority figures needed to posture and preen, and the best response was professional silence. But then Davidson had noticed the bracelet. "That's a uniform violation," he'd said, pointing at her wrist. "Jewelry is prohibited in food service areas. Health code, take it off." "Sir, this is woven paracord, not jewelry," Elena had replied calmly. "And it's been approved by—" "I don't care what it's been approved by. I'm in command now, and I say it comes off immediately." That's when Elena had set down her serving spoon and turned to face him fully. That's when she'd refused. And that's when 30 people in the mess hall realized they were about to witness something unprecedented. Because Elena Morrison didn't refuse orders. Not ever. In 11 years, she'd been the model of compliance. Quiet, efficient, invisible. The kind of NCO who did her job so well that officers rarely remembered she existed. Until this moment. "Sir," Elena said again, her voice still calm, but carrying a weight that made several nearby soldiers look up with sudden attention. "This bracelet doesn't come off. Not for you. Not for anyone." Colonel Davidson's face flushed red, his hands clenched at his sides. And in that moment, everyone in the mess hall understood that this confrontation was about to escalate far beyond a simple uniform dispute. What none of them knew, not yet, was why a simple paracord bracelet mattered so much, or what the rope-burn scar underneath it really meant, or why Elena Morrison, who'd spent 11 years avoiding attention, had just drawn a line in the sand that she absolutely would not cross. Private Marcus Chun, who'd been washing dishes at the far end of the kitchen, found himself frozen with a dripping plate still in his hands. He'd worked under Sergeant Morrison for 8 months, and he'd never seen her raise her voice, show frustration, or do anything that might draw attention to herself. She was the sergeant who stayed late to help new recruits learn the prep schedules, who covered shifts when people got sick, who knew every soldier's food allergies by heart and made sure no one ever got served something that could harm them. And now she was refusing a direct order from a colonel. "Did she just—" Chan whispered to Corporal Jessica Martinez, who was stationed at the grill. "Yeah," Martinez breathed, her spatula forgotten as she watched the confrontation unfold. "She did." Colonel Davidson took another step closer to Elena, invading her personal space in a clear power move. "Sergeant, I'm giving you one final opportunity to comply. Remove that bracelet, or I will have you escorted from this facility and brought up on charges of insubordination." Elena didn't step back, didn't break eye contact. Her hand remained steady on the counter, the faded paracord bracelet visible against her pale skin. "Sir, with respect, I cannot and will not remove this bracelet. It represents a promise I made to someone who saved my life, and I'd rather face charges than break that promise." The words hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. "Someone who saved my life." Private Chun's eyes widened. Corporal Martinez's jaw dropped slightly. Then Staff Sergeant William Torres, who'd been doing inventory in the back, emerged from the storage room with a strange look on his face, like he'd just heard something that clicked a puzzle piece into place. "That bracelet," Torres said slowly, his voice carrying across the now silent kitchen. "Sergeant Morrison, is that—" "Don't," Elena said quietly, her eyes still locked on Colonel Davidson. "Please." But Torres had already taken several steps forward, close enough now to see the bracelet clearly, close enough to see how the green and black paracord had been woven in a specific pattern. A pattern that soldiers who'd served in certain units would recognize instantly. "Sir," Torres said, addressing Colonel Davidson now, "I think you should know. I don't need kitchen staff telling me what I should know." Davidson snapped. "This soldier has refused a direct order. That's all that matters here." "But sir—" "Sergeant Torres, stand down. That's an order." Torres's mouth clamped shut, but his eyes remained fixed on Elena's wrist. On the bracelet, on the scar underneath that was just barely visible when she moved her arm a certain way. Elena took a slow breath. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but somehow more intense. "Colonel, what you're asking me to do, you might as well ask me to spit on a grave. This bracelet was made for me by a soldier who died because I wasn't fast enough. It's the only thing I have left of her, and I promised that I would wear it until I stopped breathing." The mess hall had gone so quiet that the distant sound of morning PT formations could be heard through the walls. The rhythmic cadence of drill sergeants counting out exercises. The everyday sounds of a military base coming to life. But inside this kitchen, time had stopped. Private Chun found himself staring at the bracelet with new eyes. It wasn't just worn from age, it was worn from years of constant wear, from never being taken off, from being in dishwater, in food prep, through Texas summers and winter freezes, from being important enough to risk court-martial over. "Sir," Elena continued, and now there was something in her voice that made even Colonel Davidson hesitate. "I've served 19 years in this army. 19 years. I've never once refused an order, never complained, never caused problems. I came to this kitchen because I wanted quiet duty. I wanted to fade into the background and just serve. That's all. She lifted her wrist slightly, letting the light catch the faded colors of the paracord. But this bracelet is not negotiable. If you need to write me up, write me up. If you need to court-martial me, do it. But I will not remove it. Not today. Not ever. Colonel Davidson's jaw worked silently. Around them, the kitchen staff watched with held breath. And somewhere in the back of Private Chun's mind, a question was forming. A question that would lead to answers that would change everything everyone thought they knew about the quiet sergeant who'd served their meals for 11 years. Who exactly was Elena Morrison before she became their cook? And what had happened to make a simple bracelet worth destroying her career over? The standoff lasted another 10 seconds before Colonel Davidson made his decision. You're relieved of duty, Sergeant Morrison. Report to my office at 1400 hours. We'll discuss your insubordination then, and trust me, there will be consequences. He turned on his heel and strode out of the mess hall, his entourage of junior officers scrambling to follow. The heavy doors swung shut behind them, and for a moment, nobody moved. Then Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging just slightly before she straightened them again with visible effort. "Show's over," she said to the kitchen staff, her voice steady despite everything. "We still have 600 soldiers to feed. Let's get back to work." But Private Chun couldn't let it go. As soon as Elena turned back to her prep station, he abandoned his dishes and crossed the kitchen to where Staff Sergeant Torres stood, still staring at the door where Davidson had exited. "Sergeant Torres," Chun whispered urgently, "you recognized that bracelet. What is it?" Torres looked at the young private, then glanced back at Elena, who was now methodically dicing vegetables as if nothing had happened. "It's not my story to tell." "But I said it's not my story." Torres's voice was firm, but not unkind. "If you want to know, you're going to have to ask her yourself. Though I'll warn you, she doesn't talk about her past. Ever." Chun watched Elena work for a long moment. The way her hands moved with absolute precision. The way she kept her back straight, even though he could see the tension in her shoulders. The way she just sacrificed her career over a piece of woven cord. That afternoon, during the lunch rush, Chun found himself watching Elena more carefully, really watching her. And he started noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. The way she could calculate portion sizes in her head, faster than most people could use a calculator. A way she anticipated problems before they happened, like knowing exactly when the industrial mixer would need adjustment, or predicting that they'd run low on rice before the count even showed it. The way she moved through the kitchen with the kind of spatial awareness that came from what? Combat training? Tactical operations? "She's been here longer than most of the officers," Corporal Martinez said quietly, appearing at Chun's elbow. 11 years in this kitchen. But nobody knows anything about her before that. "How is that possible?" Chun asked. "Military records are public for the basics, yeah? But not the details. Not if your service was classified." Chun's head snapped around. "Classified?" Martinez shrugged. "I'm just saying. That bracelet pattern? I've seen it before. My sister served with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Their support personnel used to make those bracelets for fallen comrades. Green and black. Those are Ranger colors." The words hit Chun like a physical blow. He looked back at Elena, who was now serving lunch with the same calm efficiency she always showed. Nothing in her demeanor suggested she was anything other than what she appeared to be, a career cook who'd found her niche in military food service. But the bracelet told a different story, and so did the rope burn scar underneath it. "Rangers don't make you a cook," Chun said slowly. "No," Martinez agreed. "They don't. Which means either she's lying about her background, which seems Unlikely given that she's risking court-martial over it, or there's a whole lot more to Sergeant Morrison than any of us realized. At 13:30 hours, Elena removed her apron, washed her hands, and prepared to report to Colonel Davidson's office. She checked her uniform in the small mirror by the door, making sure everything was regulation perfect, except for the one thing she refused to change. The bracelet remained on her wrist, faded and worn, carrying secrets that 11 years of quiet service had kept buried. But as she walked toward what might be the end of her military career, Private Chun was already at a computer terminal in the library, pulling up whatever public records he could find on Elena Morrison. What he discovered would send shockwaves through Fort Harrison, because Elena Morrison's official record showed exactly 19 years of service, just like she'd said. But the first 8 years of that service, they were almost entirely redacted, classified, blocked behind security clearances that a private didn't have access to. All except for 3 small details that had somehow slipped through. A combat medic badge from 2006, a deployment code that matched operations in Fallujah, Iraq, and a single commendation for actions above and beyond the call of duty during classified operations, resulting in the successful extraction of wounded personnel under heavy enemy fire. Chun stared at the screen, his mouth dry. The quiet cook who served their eggs every morning had been a combat medic in one of the most dangerous war zones of the Iraq conflict, and that rope-burn scar on her wrist? Chun was starting to have a very good idea of how she'd gotten it. Colonel Davidson's office was exactly what Elena had expected, immaculate, organized, and decorated with a kind of rigid professionalism that suggested the man had never made a decision based on feeling in his entire life. She stood at attention in front of his desk while he reviewed papers that she suspected he'd already memorized. It was a power play, making her wait, making her stand while he sat, reminding her of the massive gap in their ranks. Finally, he looked up. "Sergeant Morrison, your record shows 11 years of exemplary service here at Fort Harrison. Not a single disciplinary action, not one complaint. You've been, by all accounts, a model NCO." "Yes, sir." "Which makes this morning's insubordination all the more baffling." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I've dealt with rebels before. Soldiers who push boundaries for the sake of pushing them. But you're not that type. So I'm going to ask you directly, why throw away an otherwise perfect record over a piece of string?" Elena's fingers brushed the bracelet reflexively. "Sir, it's not string. I know what it is, Sergeant. After you left the mess hall, I did some research. Paracord memorial bracelets, common among certain special operations communities, made to honor fallen soldiers." He pulled out a file. Her file, Elena realized with a sinking feeling, and opened it. "Your record before Fort Harrison is heavily redacted. But I have the clearance you don't think I have. I can see what's behind those black bars." Elena's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. 75th Ranger Regiment Support Battalion, Davidson read aloud. Combat medic. 3 deployments to Iraq between 2005 and 2008. Attached to Ranger operations in Fallujah, Ramadi, and Mosul. He looked up. "That's not exactly kitchen duty, Sergeant." "No, sir, it's not. You saved lives under fire. Multiple commendations. Bronze Star with V device. Purple Heart after a convoy ambush in 2007. He tapped the file. "And then in 2008, you are medically reassigned. The details of that incident are classified above my clearance level, which means it was significant. After that, you requested reassignment to food service, and you've been here ever since." Elena remained silent, her eyes fixed on a point on the wall behind Davidson's head. "So here's what I don't understand," Davidson continued. "You were clearly an exceptional soldier, a combat medic who worked alongside some of the most elite warriors in our military. And then you chose to become a cook. Why? Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted." Elena took a breath. "Because being a cook means I don't watch anyone else die." It means I serve soldiers who go home at the end of the day. It means I can sleep at night without seeing faces that I couldn't save. The words came out harder than she'd intended. For 11 years, she'd kept this buried. For 11 years, she'd been content to fade into the background and just be the reliable NCO who made sure everyone was fed. But now the door was cracking open on a past she'd tried so hard to seal shut. "The bracelet," Davidson said quietly. "Who made it for you?" Elena's hand moved to her wrist, covering the paracord protectively. Her name was Corporal Sarah Hendricks. We served together in Ramadi. She was a ranger, one of the first women to make it through the selection process. She was. Elena's voice caught slightly. She was my best friend. Was? She died in 2008, during the incident that got me medically reassigned. The office fell silent. Outside, Elena could hear the muffled sounds of the base going about its afternoon routine. Soldiers training, vehicles moving, the ordinary sounds of military life continuing while she stood here, bleeding out secrets she'd kept locked away for more than a decade. Davidson closed the file slowly. "Tell me what happened." "Sir, it's classified." I said, "Tell me what happened, Sergeant." "That's an order." Elena closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears that she refused to let fall. "We were providing medical support for a ranger operation in eastern Ramadi. Intelligence suggested the target building was likely defended. Intelligence was wrong. And memories came back sharp as broken glass. Our team was ambushed the moment we breached the building," Elena continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "RPG hit the wall to our left. Shrapnel everywhere. 3 Rangers down in the first 10 seconds. I started triage immediately, but then the roof collapsed." Davidson listened without interrupting, his earlier hostility replaced by something closer to respect. "Sarah and I were trapped in a back room with 2 wounded Rangers. The rest of the team couldn't reach us. Too much enemy fire. I had 1 Ranger with a sucking chest wound and another with a severed femoral artery. I had maybe 10 minutes before they both bled out." Elena's fingers traced the rope-burn scar through the bracelet. "The only way out was through a second-floor window, but we had to rappel down using whatever we had." Sarah took off her rigger's belt, tied it to mine, and anchored it to an exposed rebar. "We lowered the wounded Rangers first." "And the rope burn?" Davidson asked quietly. The belt started slipping. The weight was too much. I wrapped the nylon around my wrist to hold it, to give Sarah time to reinforce the anchor. The friction. Elena's voice trailed off. "I held that rope for 4 minutes while she worked. By the time we got both Rangers down, I had 3rd-degree burns through to the bone." Davidson winced. "But we got them out. Both Rangers survived." Elena's voice hardened. Then Sarah went back in for our med supplies. I tried to stop her, but she said we'd need them for the others. She was climbing back up when the building took another hit. The whole structure came down. The silence in the office was absolute. It took them 6 hours to dig her out. She was still alive when they found her, but Elena's voice finally broke. "She died in my arms. And the last thing she said to me was, 'Don't you dare blame yourself. You saved them. That's what we do.'" A single tear escaped, tracking down Elena's cheek. She wiped it away roughly. 3 days later, I was in a hospital in Germany. My wrist was destroyed. Too much nerve damage for field medicine. They told me I could stay in support roles, but I'd never be cleared for combat operations again. Sarah's personal effects were delivered to me before I shipped stateside. Inside was this bracelet. She'd been making it for me, planning to give it to me when our deployment ended. Elena held up her wrist, showing Davidson the worn paracord. She never got to finish it, so I did. And I promised her grave, that I would wear it every single day for the rest of my life, that I would remember, that I would honor her sacrifice by continuing to serve, even if it meant serving in a kitchen instead of a combat zone. Colonel Davidson stood slowly, moved around his desk, and did something that shocked Elena completely. He came to attention and saluted her. "Colonel, I'm enlisted. You don't need to—" "Yes, I do," Davidson said firmly. "Sergeant Morrison, I came into your mess hall this morning with preconceptions about discipline and standards. I was wrong, and I apologize." Elena struggled to process what was happening. "You've been serving this army with honor for 19 years, Davidson continued. "And instead of recognizing that, I treated you like a problem to be corrected. That bracelet represents sacrifice and brotherhood that I should have respected from the beginning." He lowered his salute and extended his hand. "Your bracelet stays. And if anyone else at Fort Harrison has a problem with it, they can come discuss it with me directly." Elena shook his hand, too stunned to speak. But the story wasn't over. Because outside Davidson's office, word was already spreading through Fort Harrison like wildfire. Private Chun had shared what he'd found in the records. Staff Sergeant Torres had confirmed the bracelet's significance, and Corporal Martinez had started asking questions of personnel who'd served in Iraq during the same time frame. By 1800 hours that evening, when Elena returned to the mess hall to prep for the next day, she found something that made her stop in her tracks. The entire kitchen staff was standing in formation, each one of them wearing a paracord bracelet, different colors, different patterns, but all clearly memorial bracelets honoring fallen comrades. "We didn't know," Private Chun said simply. "We should have. And we're sorry." Word of Elena Morrison's true service record spread through Fort Harrison faster than wildfire through dry brush. By the next morning, the story had reached the battalion commander. By the afternoon, it had reached the base commander. And by week's end, something remarkable began to happen. Soldiers who passed Elena in the corridors started snapping to attention. Not because regulations required it. She was an NCO, not an officer, but out of respect. Young privates who'd once seen her as just another staff sergeant now understood they were serving, alongside a decorated combat veteran who'd saved lives under fire. The mess hall took on a different atmosphere. Conversations were more respectful. The kitchen ran smoother. And most notably, soldiers began lingering after meals, not just to talk, but to listen, because Elena, after 11 years of silence, had finally started sharing small pieces of her story. Not the classified parts, not the nightmares, but the lessons. "In Ramadi, we had a saying," she told a group of young soldiers one evening during dinner prep. "Take care of your people, and they'll take care of the mission." That's still true here. You think kitchen duty isn't important? Every calorie I serve you is fuel for your training. Every meal is part of your readiness. This isn't less than combat. It's just a different kind of service. Private Chun, who'd appointed himself Elena's unofficial protector, absorbed every word. He'd gone from seeing her as a nice supervisor to understanding that he was learning from someone who'd walked through fire and come out stronger. But the most significant change came 3 weeks after the confrontation with Colonel Davidson. Elena arrived at the mess hall at her usual 0500 hours to find something waiting for her. A small wooden display case mounted on the wall near the entrance. Inside were her actual medals, the Bronze Star with V device, the Purple Heart, the Combat Medic Badge, and several others she'd kept packed away in storage for over a decade. A small brass plaque beneath them read, "SSG Elena Morrison, 75th Ranger Regiment Support Battalion, that others may live." Colonel Davidson was standing next to it, along with the base commander, Brigadier General Patricia Weeks. "Sergeant Morrison," General Weeks said formally, "the Army has a bad habit of forgetting its quiet heroes. The ones who serve without seeking recognition. The ones who transfer to support roles can fade into the background. But Fort Harrison won't forget. Not anymore." She gestured to the display case. "Your service in combat saved lives. But your service here, feeding our soldiers, mentoring our young troops, showing up every single day with integrity and professionalism, that matters just as much." Both deserve recognition. Elena stood speechless, staring at the medals she hadn't seen in 11 years. The bracelet stays. General Weeks continued with a slight smile. Obviously. But these belong out here too, where young soldiers can see them, where they can understand that service takes many forms, and all of them matter. That afternoon, Elena returned to her kitchen to find it transformed. Not physically. The stoves were the same, the industrial mixers unchanged, the prep stations exactly where they'd always been. But the atmosphere was different. The younger staff worked with more purpose. The morning jokes were gentler. And when Corporal Martinez accidentally knocked over a tray of fresh rolls, instead of cursing, she simply looked at Elena and said, "Ranger standard, adapt and overcome, right?" Elena smiled, actually smiled, and helped pick up the rolls. Exactly right. Private Chun watched from his station, a strange feeling of pride warming his chest. He'd joined the army looking for heroes, expecting to find them in combat units or special operations. He'd never imagined he'd find one serving breakfast. But now he understood something crucial. Heroes don't stop being heroes when they hang up their combat gear. They just find new ways to serve, new ways to take care of their people, new ways to honor the promises they've made to the fallen. That evening, after the dinner service was complete and the kitchen was clean, Elena stood alone in the mess hall, looking at the display case on the wall. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. Older now, with silver threading through her auburn hair, with lines around her eyes that spoke of years and experience, but also with something she hadn't seen in her own face for a long time: peace. She touched the paracord bracelet on her wrist, still faded, still frayed at the edges, still carrying the weight of a promise made over a grave 11 years ago. "I'm still here, Sarah," she whispered. "Still serving, still keeping the promise." And for the first time since that horrible day in Ramadi, Elena felt like maybe that was enough. 6 months later, Fort Harrison's mess hall had become something of a pilgrimage site. Soldiers from other bases who heard the story would sometimes request transfers just to serve under Elena Morrison. Young medics would seek her out for advice. And the display case with her medals had been joined by something else: a memorial wall where any soldier could add a photo or tribute to a fallen comrade. The wall grew slowly but steadily. A picture of a Marine killed in Afghanistan, a set of dog tags from a sailor lost at sea, a folded flag from a soldier who died in training, and in the center of it all, a photograph of Corporal Sarah Hendricks in her ranger uniform, smiling at the camera with the kind of confidence that suggested she'd believed she was invincible. Below her photo, Elena had placed a small plaque with Sarah's last words: "Don't you dare blame yourself. You saved them. That's what we do." Private Chun, now 6 months deeper into his service, stood in front of the memorial wall one morning before breakfast, studying the faces. He'd added his own contribution the week before, a picture of his grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who died when Chun was young. "They're all watching," Elena said quietly, appearing at his elbow with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. "Every person on this wall. They're watching to see if we remember, if we honor them by living with integrity, if we serve with the same courage they showed." Chun took the coffee gratefully. "Do you think we measure up?" Elena smiled, the real smile that had become more common in recent months. "Every single day that you show up, do your job with excellence, and take care of your people, yeah, you measure up." She raised her coffee cup in a silent toast to the wall of faces. Sean mirrored her gesture. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Corporal Sarah Hendricks smiled back. To everyone who typed courage and shared where you're watching from, thank you for standing with our heroes. Subscribe for more stories like this and unsung American heroes. See you in the next one.